shop.
Hey, you made it back. I'm here too. You know what that means. Let's get together now, talk about some records, and have some fun and see what's in the shop. Let's dive straight in. Let's go back, roll the clock back to 1978, and another countless unknown punk band called Bazooka Joe paying their dues and playing in London. Aren't really going anywhere, but the band starts to split up. One, Stuart Goddard, takes a couple guys and forms a band called Adam and the Ants, and this Stuart is who became fondly known as Adam Ant, as we all know and love Adam Ant. Anyway, he continued on trying to make his own brand of punk rock, and dime a dozen punk rock band, whatever. Adam and the Ants did a couple singles, did a debut album with a very stupid name, Dirk Wears White Socks. It didn't really do much, but it did. That's the contradiction. It got to number one on the independent charts, but it whetted Adam's appetite. He wanted more. He had already been, actually, funnily enough, in, I think it was Derek Jarman's film Jubilee, which came out in 1978, I think it was. So he had already been in a film, got his rock and roll band together, but he wanted a little more. He felt things were changing, punk was changing. He needed to get up with it, get up, stay up with the times, so the kids will love it, so to speak. So he knew of a dude who had a lot of ideas, and this dude was the former manager of the Sex Pistols, Mr. Malcolm McLaren, who also ran Sex, the clothing store with Vivienne Westwood that we all know about, of course. So Adam decides he needs to do a little consultation with Malcolm McLaren. So he goes to see Malcolm McLaren, who charges him £1,000 to tell him what's hip, what's cool, what's not. So they have this discussion. Malcolm is saying, Adam, I think you need to, bring in some crazy African drumming. Pirates, everybody loves pirates. Indians too, mix Indians in there. Why don't you take that and see what happens and put that out there? So Adam did just that. Funny thing is, though, after the consultation, Malcolm stole Adam's ants. So Adam had to draft in some new ants. But this worked in his favor. One of these new ants was Marco Perroni, who he worked with, like this, as songwriters. And it paid off. Because in 1980, am I correct? Yes. In 1980, Adam and his new ants released the biggest album of their career, Kings of the Wild Frontier. And this is it right here. Awesome record. In fact, one critic called it the defining album, or I should say a defining album of its time, which it is, actually. It is. It's a very cool record, very unique sounding for that time, because Adam did apply some of Malcolm's ideas, and it became a huge hit. Such a big hit, actually. This was released in late 1980. In 1981, it was the biggest selling album in Britain, long before Oasis was in the picture. And in 1982, it actually won a Brit Award for Best British Album. So it did indeed make an impact on pop history. And in fact, 1982, one could argue, was the beginning. Well, England was in the throes of Ant Mania. Adam Ant was huge at this time. Few things about this record, though. I remember getting this record with my older brother. I don't remember who got it, if it was me or my older brother, but we couldn't get enough of this record when I was a teenager. It was awesome. So sorry to digress there. I have to mention too the cover. I love this cover. If you look closely, it looks like the pictures are taken from a TV screen, which actually they were. Photographer Peter Ashworth was doing a photo session with these guys, and actually did one session of the band and whatnot, and then decided to shoot a little more just in case. And he put the band in a studio with I think a black backdrop, and had them goof off or mime to their songs and whatnot. But instead of photographing the band, he photographed a video monitor he had. So that's where all these great images came from, and it's an iconic image, just like an iconic album. In fact, Kings of the Wild Frontier is listed as one of the 1001 albums you must hear before you die. But another thing real quick, I forgot to mention earlier, Adam and the Ants, Kings of the Wild Frontier is the name of the album. It was also the name of one of the singles. I don't remember the order exactly. I think the singles that came out for the album were Kings of the Wild Frontier, same name as the album, Dog Eat Dog, and Ant Music. Now, it just so happens that I have a copy on 7-inch, awesome, of Dog Eat Dog here in the store. As you can see, same type thing. This is taken from the same session as the album with the lines in it, the monitor lines. Love it. Why is this important? It's not that the song is that great or anything, and it was the second single released from the album, but what is important about this single is the back. You have this drawing of this warrior ant that says, Ant Music for Sex People, because after all, Adam and his new ants now were doing something different, making ant music. But what's cool about this is his old bandmate from Bazooka Joe drew this, and at the time, during Ant Mania, this was just such a sought-after thing, whether it was on little pins or t-shirts or whatever. But this logo, again, is an iconic logo. It's a very cool thing, and it made its debut on the back of Dog Eat Dog. At the height of Ant Mania in 81, 82, when everything, Adam and the Ants are everywhere, Adam decided it's time to go solo. Right at the height of Ant Mania, when the Ants were blowing up. Well, actually, they did put out Prince Charming, their third album, which didn't do as well as this, and Adam decided to walk away, taking Marco Perrone with him. Of course, he had a successful solo career, would eventually ended up recording in ABBA studio, getting produced by Phil Collins, but hey, whatever. And blowing up again, when was it? In 1990, funnily enough. What was the name of that album? I don't recall off the top of my head. But we're not talking about that right now. We're moving on. Remember I told you Malcolm had stolen the Ants for a new project. This new project was made up of three guys, three ants, if you will, and a young girl. Now, rock and roll lore has it she was 14 at the time, and Malcolm, or one of his cohorts, heard her singing in a laundromat. So he said, hey, you want to be in a rock and roll band, punk band, new wave band? Yeah, why not? Who doesn't? So, thus we have Bow Wow Wow. Now, as we all know, Malcolm's ideas worked for the Pistols, working for the Ants. At the same time, the Ants are basically being launched. Bow Wow Wow are being launched. And there's somewhat of a rivalry there because ex-band members from the Ants are now the guys powering Bow Wow Wow. Bow Wow Wow, this is 1980, same year as this. Bow Wow Wow released their first single, C30, C60, C90, Go. What the heck is all the C's about? For those of you old enough to remember, those are cassette times. A C30 cassette was a 30-minute cassette, C60 was hour, and so on and so forth. Now, Bow Wow Wow released their debut single, C30, C60, C90, Go. And they also released it in cassette format. So it was out on 7-inch and a cassette. And this is of historical importance because that would have been the world's first single. But what I have here is the next thing they released in cassette form as well, which was their debut EP, the Your Cassette Pet. Very cool indeed. This has the debut single, C30, C60, C90, Go, and 7 other songs. So there's 8-song EP on this. Now, a real quick thing about this. Malcolm's idea with this packaging was, because it was a bigger, his band was getting known now, and it's kind of their debut album, even though it was an EP, Malcolm thought music should be disposable to some degree. And he based the whole concept of this cassette, single, can you call this a single? Your Cassette Pet, on the idea of being disposable. He copied the idea from a cigarette pack with the flip top. And the reasoning was, you take your tape out, and just like if you were a smoker, when you finish your cigarette, your last cigarette, what do? Well, if you were a bad guy, you would take your thing and throw it in the street, throw your cigarette pack away. Same idea. Music is disposable. That's what Malcolm was getting at. Get the music, throw the rest away. Interesting little piece here. You don't see these a lot anymore, but if you do see them, like you have, well, I know where one is, here in the shop. You should grab it. It's a very cool thing to have. Now, Bow Wow Wow, about Bow Wow Wow. C30, C60, C90 Go was okay. This came out, got him more notoriety. When this was released in 1981, which was really interesting, right? 1980, 1981. Sorry, my dates are a little mixed up there. Out on EMI was who signed Bow Wow Wow. At the time, you may remember, there was a lot of controversy over home taping. Inside the records, you would see ads in music magazines and whatever of the little cassette, like a skull and crossbones, that would say home taping is killing music. Well, the irony in this, as well as Bow Wow Wow's 7-inch version and the original single version, is it was about the joys of home taping. That's what C30, C60, C90 Go was about. And funnily enough, Malcolm McLaren is a co-writer on that song. So anyway, when EMI put this out after the debut single, EMI was very hesitant to promote it. Why? Because EMI was essentially promoting this brand new album from a band that was saying, why buy records? Tape your own records. Don't bother buying this. In fact, their lore is, rock and roll lore, again, a myth, was the original pressings of this had all the songs on one side, so you could tape whatever you wanted on the other side. Now, ironically enough, EMI was very hesitant to promote Bow Wow Wow with this, in this format, when they were going on about home taping. But the irony is, another label, Virgin, or Island Records, I should say, excuse me, not Virgin, Island started their own cassette campaign. I think it was called the One-on-One campaign. What was it called? Give me 1 second. Yes, 1+1. The 1+1 range. And a couple of the artists on there were actually John Martin, I believe it was with his One World album, and U2. U2's Boy album was issued in that. Now what it was, Virgin was trying to cash in on the chaos kind of caused by Bow Wow Wow and the whole home taping craze. Sorry, Island was trying to cash in with that. And they were putting the whole album on one side, but every cassette came with a little insert. And that insert said, one side what you like, one side whatever you like. But of course, that whole concept of buying a tape with a pre-recorded album and taping what album you want on the other side didn't last very long, needless to say. But if you do have any of those cassettes with the insert still in, it's a cool thing to have. A few quick things about this. One of the early critics, or a critic frequently cited, and I cite him a lot here too, from the 70s and early 80s, well, up through the 80s, was Robert Christgau of the Village Voice. Let me read you what he had to say about this little gem, because he's kind of on point about a few things, but you know him, he's kind of cynical in some ways too. Let me tell you what he said. Only 2 great songs on this 8 selection, Shorty, he called it. All the rest is ant music. Remember, he had stolen the ants for Bow Wow Wow. It's certainly true, though, that Adam's old backup boys display a lot of verve and cheek and high good humor more than the new ones. Not only that, Sexy Eiffel Towers and the sly, loving, brazen Louis XIV almost justify Malcolm McLaren's dubious project of inventing a sex life for his 14-year-old Galatia. I didn't even know who Galatia was. Do you? Look it up. That's what Christgau had to say about this. Now, this was controversial in some ways. The record label was afraid of what was being promoted. But the real controversy came when Bow Wow Wow put out their first full length shortly thereafter. And The controversy there was, well, the name of the album. See jungle, go join your gang, yeah. City all over, go ape crazy. It's kind of a long name. Anyway, the album, the debut album, based on Manet's what was it called? Manet's Déjeuner sur la Herbe, or Breakfast on the Lawn, whatever you want to say, based after that famous painting. If you ever had an art class, you know what I'm talking about. The controversy was this 14, 15-year-old girl at the time, Annabella Lewin, was naked on the cover. Supposedly, her mother was so upset that she called in Scotland Yard to investigate McLaren and his boys to see if they were actually pedophiles or what the heck was going on. Obviously, Malcolm thought that was good enough, so they reused the image on the next EP, The Last of the Mohicans, and funnily enough, on the next record, they have Annabella is naked on that as well. That's the I Want Candy album. A nice note to that, though, in spite of all the controversy, that image that was the cover of the first Bow Wow Wow album now hangs in the National Portrait Gallery in London. So look at that. Now it's just accepted by society that you have that young naked girl on the cover. Who would have thunk, right? Go Wild in the Country was a top 10 hit off of the debut album. They had a slight hit, but not as big, again, with the next single, or shortly thereafter, with I Want Candy, which was a cover version. Malcolm felt things were getting a little stale, so he wanted to give Bow Wow Wow another little edge, so he drafted in another singer to sing with Annabella. And this was Lieutenant Lush. Malcolm was a little perturbed by this, a little worried, because he felt there was something brewing there with Lieutenant Lush. So Lieutenant Lush only stayed with Bow Wow Wow for a short time, and Malcolm handed him his walking papers. Beat it, kid. A few months later, said Lieutenant Lush shows up, none other than this guy, Boy George, with his band Culture Club. This is their debut album, Kissing to Be Clever, and well, kind of like Bow Wow Wow, or more so like the Ants, whatnot, Culture Club kind of filled that gap. When the Ants started to lose, when Ant Mania was kind of going down, everybody was crazy about the Boy. Remember that time? Anyway, Kissing to Be Clever. Got the band, well, it kind of put them in a historically important place as well. Why? It was actually the first single from this album. They had put out 2 prior singles, which did absolutely nothing. But point being, it was the 3rd single that they released that blew it wide open for them, and that was Do You Really Want to Hurt Me, which I think is a great song. Smash Hits disagrees with me. They said it was awful, that it was like weak, warmed up, 4th-rate reggae. I disagree. So did All Music, because they said it was basically a masterpiece. They called it a simple masterpiece, resonating with an ache that harked back to classic Torch songs of yesterday. Now, that single broke them wide open, made this album historically important, as I said. Why? Because in the United States, at least, this album made Culture Club the first band since the Beatles to have 3 singles go top 10 off their debut album. Not an easy feat. So no wonder everybody was now into Culture Club or crazy about the Boy all around the world, because, hey, they were making some great pop music. Of course, Culture Club would release their next album soon afterwards, Kissing to Be Clever, Color by Numbers, which itself would only get to number 2. Why? Because Michael Jackson's Thriller was still hogging the charts. Odd thing is, remember I mentioned Malcolm McLaren in all this? In 1982, I think it was, after he gave his advice to the Ants, did Bow Wow Wow, really had nothing to do with these guys except that he employed Lieutenant Lush at one time. McLaren took some of his own ideas with the Burundi drumming, the hip-hop culture and whatever, mixed it all together and put out his debut. I believe it was in 1982 or 83. His Duck Rock album, which had the big single on it, Buffalo Gals. And it's a great album. It's kind of hard to find these days. So if you see it, grab it. So just a quick rerun. Let's go back through to tie all the pieces together. McLaren came up with the ideas, finally put out his solo album after everybody else. He employed Lieutenant Lush to help Bow Wow Wow at one time. Bow Wow Wow, who we have here, put out Your Cassette Pet. Totally important, because the single on here, their debut single, C30, C60, C90 Go, was also a cassette and was the world's first single. Bow Wow Wow would not have had existed had it not been for these guys, Adam and the Ants, because Malcolm stole Adam's Ants to make Bow Wow Wow. This was the biggest selling album in 1981 in England and won Best British Album in 1982 in the Brit Awards. There we have a quick run through of how all those are related. I hope you stuck with me through all that and it wasn't confusing. It's hard to remember all this stuff and to get facts straight, numbers straight, dates straight, but I hope you enjoyed it and that you stuck it out and you bear with me with that. Any ideas? If you want me to talk about any bands or whatever, as I say every time, get in touch here on Instagram, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can leave comments below. You can also drop a line at noisyrecordsmx@hotmail.com, and I'll jump on it and see what you have to say. Thanks again for spending some time with me. Hope you learned something fun. If you want any of these things, let me know. By the way, I'm crazy about Bow Wow Wow, collecting Bow Wow Wow right now. So anybody watching, if you have some cool Bow Wow Wow stuff, let me know, because don't ask me why, but I'm crazy for it right now. Thanks again, everybody. Take care. Keep on rocking.